Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 151 of I Wish You Were Dead, a podcast about things that used to be alive. My name is Mike, that is Gavin, and that is Fia. And guys, happy January 6th.
Yay. Woo. Shout outs to 4 years ago, Gavin, who sort of accidentally predicted this.
Yeah.
We've been doing the podcast long enough now where it's been like multiple presidential administrations.
Yeah.
You can go back. This is back when I was editing the episodes. You can go back and find whichever episode it was, whichever one came out.
It was like
January 6th.
Yeah, it was like episode 2 or 3.
It was very early on.
Yeah, well, because we
right
were...
at the end of the episode. Kevin.
Yeah.
Yeah, you anti-predicted it. You're like, yeah, I'm
I
not
did.
worried about anything that's going on at the Capitol.
No, yeah, we were just kind of talking, and
Yep.
I was like, yeah, I'm not really worried about the 6th. I'm more worried about Inauguration Day was what I was more concerned about at the time. Boy, was I wrong. Because we had also recorded probably our first like three or 4 episodes before any of them went up, because it was like around holiday time.
Right.
And I think we also both just kind of wanted to figure out what we were doing.
Right.
And so whatever episode we had recorded where we talked about that at the end was like the one at the start of like the gap, because then we took like a week or two. That was when we were still posting weekly.
Right.
And so we took like probably 2 or 3 weeks off for like holiday stuff. And then we came back, and the previous end of the episode was like, yep, nothing happening here. I was like, oof.
And then I had to go in and just like add like a quick thing that I recorded
Yeah.
at work. I was like, hey, by the way, guys, I'm editing this now. I'm hearing it the same way you are. It's not what he meant. Those were some dark times. Some lighter times though. The 3 of us got to hang out.
We did.
Yeah.
over the holiday break.
Yeah.
Yeah,
was
I got
fun.
to see Fia's face in person in probably 3 years.
When was the last time all 3 of us
Oh
were in the
yeah,
same
you
place
were not
together?
Hobie.
I wasn't.
Yeah.
So I feel like I know the last time that I had seen Fia was one time in the summer at Rookie's cabin in, I think, 2020.
Maybe 2021.
Maybe.
It was like turning
And-
2021.
Right.
Yeah, probably. I
Yeah,
don't
it's
know.
hard to-
No, maybe it was 2021.
Years have been so weird.
Yeah.
They've been weird for so many reasons. However, so we were together for some good news. It was actually an event.
Yeah.
Fia is about to get married,
Hooray!
which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And she orchestrated this elaborate conspiracy where
I did.
we all
Yep.
got to absolutely, and don't act like you don't know what you're talking about.
Okay.
We all get together. A lot of Fia's New York friends. We get together. We have this fun event. When we're celebrating, the bride and groom to be. We're all very happy. We get to see Fia again, which is fun because she doesn't live in New York anymore. And her mom, Fia's mom, decides to pretend like this is an off the cuff thing. All right, we're all going to stand up and say something nice about the bride and groom.
I did not plan
and
that.
Fia's going to go first. So Fia stands up as though she had not planned this and goes,
And she
so I want to
definitely
thank you guys
did.
all. Yeah, 100% had planned this. This was an evil plan the entire time. Well done, well executed. I might
Yes.
add, Fia.
What is this?
And
evil plan?
Fia stands up and goes, I want to thank you guys all for coming. And by the way, this is my announcement that none of you are invited to the actual wedding.
Yeah.
So thanks for showing up to this. So it was a wonderful little event. And I was
Yeah.
like, as that was happening, I'm like, wow, this is very well done and very well orchestrated that Fia was able to, get us all to be happy, excited, and still give her gifts and everything.
Yeah.
And then say, by the way, never want to see you again. So
Mike,
Fia,
no.
tip my hat to you. Well done.
That's not the intention.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't.
Yep, sure.
I just wanted to see you, and also my mom forced me to have this engagement party.
Wait, hold on. What do you
I
mean your
get
mom
that.
forced you?
Did
Did you not want to have it?
not it particularly.
Well, I'm glad that your mom forced you to have it because I
Yes.
had a great time.
Yeah, I also got to see several of my other, Hobie friends there that I haven't seen in a while because it's been a while since I've been to the
Mm-hmm.
New York Hobie.
And we just straight up monopolized the center table.
Yeah,
It
that
was
was
like
awesome.
this common area.
Yep, sure did.
And like we our group just showed up. There was, I don't know, probably 8 to 10 of us there. And we just showed up, sat right down in the center, and made everyone else work around us.
Yep.
It was epic.
Love
And
it.
I am not sorry about that even a little bit.
But yeah, if I remember to do social media things, which historically for this podcast I'm not good at, I will. Actually, Fia, I don't think I actually got sent the pictures of us together.
Yeah.
So if Fia
Me
sends me
neither.
those, oh, you haven't either. Okay, well, there may or may not be social media.
No, I
probably
haven't.
not.
No
Let me-
photos of the event?
let-
Sounds like a conspiracy to me.
Let me do some digging.
Okay. But yeah, so it was great to see Mike and Fia both in person for, like I said, the first time the three of us were together in several years. Several years.
I mean, certainly since the three of us started doing the podcast, it's the first
yeah.
time the three of us have been together.
Yep.
At the
No
same
way.
time.
Yeah,
I'm
for
pretty sure.
Absolutely it is.
This is wild.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah.
All right, so anyways,
Yep,
we've got like
we-
actual episode stuff
yeah, we
to
sure do.
start getting into. now.
Yeah, so if you missed our, like, I put out a couple little updates over the sort of holiday season, Christmas and New Year's.
We took a break.
We did. So I put up a little update that went out on New Year's Day. Basically, long story short, if you didn't listen to that, my grandma passed away, so I spent some time with some family. Not going to really get into it, but all things considered, it went about as well as it could have, But being a paleontologist, I'm around death and think about death a lot. So family members dying is always a little strange for me compared to a lot of like my relatives. I didn't have those conversations with them because that's weird. But anyway, we're back to podcasting now, and we're here to talk about hogs.
Nice.
30 to 50
hog.
feral hogs. That is if you understand that reference, let me know in the YouTube or
That's a
or
real
Twitter.
callback.
30 to 50 feral hogs. If you understand that, please let me know, and I will smile as I read the YouTube comments. Anywho, before we get into the actual episode, though, first, Fia, do we have some housekeeping now that we're a solid several minutes into the podcast?
Oh yes, of course. Wait, what is this again?
Housekeeping.
The housekeeping, right, of course. Welcome, Happy New Year, everybody. Don't forget to rate the show on whatever platform you listen to us on, and to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube to give us feedback about the show and any future topics you would like to hear on the pod. And if you would like to be a guest on the show, be sure to fill out the guest form, and all that good stuff can be found in the show notes. Then, Gavin, what is next episode topic?
Yeah, I'm feeling a little spicy to start out the new year. I told Mike and Fia what the topic is going to be for next episode before we started recording. We're going to be talking about the Scopes trial. If you're not familiar with that, it is a very famous legal case from the 1920s about the legality of teaching evolution in public schools. Very interesting case for a lot of reasons. Because we've been on break so long, I figured I should do my future self a favor and prep some of it. So it's about half done already. And if I had hair, I would no longer have hair because it is so frustrating to just...
It's a good joke.
Thank you. To read a lot of the things that were just going on in the world at the time, and how many of those things are happening. Either they never stopped or are once again happening. We'll get into much more detail about it in a couple weeks. So look forward to that.
Hell yeah.
With that, Fia was a little down in the dumps today, health-wise, so we do not have a seagrass corner. No shade. She's here on the show, which is all we can ask for at the end of the day.
I made it.
Yeah. So Mike, what happened today in history? Very notably, the day this episode goes out, not the day we're recording, which is, as previously mentioned, January 6th.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're recording on January 6th. Some interesting stuff has happened on January 6th in history, but we're not talking about that. We're doing January 8th.
That's right.
Originally, I thought we were going to talk about in 1918 how Mississippi became the first state. Mississippi becomes the first state to ratify the 18th Amendment, authorizing the prohibition of alcohol, getting prohibition ratified. But then I stopped looking into that because I saw a different one that took place in 1902. In 1902, New York State Assemblyman Francis G. Landon got a bill passed to criminalize men turning around on a street and, quote, looking at a woman in that way, close quote.
Like, was that the text of the law?
That's what that was the quote here that I'm reading. And then on his Wikipedia page, I've never heard of this dude before, Francis G. Landon. So I go to his Wikipedia page. In 1902, he introduced an anti-flirting bill that would criminalize people who drank too much and tried too hard to get women to look their way, which came with a fine of $500.
What does that even mean?
I don't know, but I love it. I love everything about it.
Is it still
so, according to this Wikipedia article, which does not appear to be super well sourced or well updated, but take it for whatever it's worth. And I'm not going to spend the time to look too deep into this in the middle of recording a podcast. The law was still on the books in 2017, although it wasn't heavily enforced by then.
Oh, yeah, gee. So, wait, so this was New York State law?
I believe so.
Fascinating.
Because he was in the assembly. Yeah, he must have been a state law. So, just, if you're a man in New York State and you get drunk and you're trying to get women to look at you in that way, just know you're breaking the law.
No. It's if they look in you. If the man looks, I thought.
Right. So, yeah, which one was committing the crime, the man or the woman, in this scenario?
Let's see here. So this one says, criminalize men turning around on the street and looking at a woman in that way. The Wikipedia article says, would criminalize people who drank too much and tried too hard to get women to look their way. So we have conflicting accounts here from two different sources. How about this? Just don't flirt. Stay safe. Stay out of trouble. No purple.
No purple. That is what we say at Hobie. No purpling. It used to be in the very binary way of boys are blue, girls are red, no purple. Now it's just you're blue, everybody else is red, no purple.
Mm-hmm.
I do just want to point out that while we've been recording, Fia was hitting up the group chat.
Yes.
With pictures of us from the special event.
If I didn't find it now, it wouldn't happen.
No, I appreciate that.
Fair.
So it is really all on Gavin now to update the social media. There is no excuse.
There is no excuse.
And there's also no more excuse to delay the actual podcast. So Gavin, let's go ahead and talk here. Let's talk about some bacon.
Yeah, let's talk about hogs, swine,
hogs,
pigs.
Boss Hogs, may he rest in peace.
I don't know who that's referring to, but sure. Yes, pigs. We're going to use the term pigs mostly for the rest of the episode, even though I don't have a pop filter on my mic, and it's probably going to sound very terrible, but we're doing it anyway.
Pigs.
Pigs are one of the best known animals in the world, mostly because we domesticated pigs over 8,000 years ago, and there are around 1 billion, with a B, of them on the planet.
Wow.
We eat over 100 million tons of pork every year. We eat a ton of pigs.
Do we know how that compares to beef or chicken or
tofurkey? Depends on the country.
Okay.
Basically, in any country, pork is basically always first or second in terms of main source of protein. In some places, like a lot of East Asian countries, fish is number one. in other countries, most notably like America, beef is also very high. It also depends how you calculate it in terms of like pound of animal versus like number of animal. But in pretty much every country, pork is either number 1 or number 2.
Gotcha.
Pigs are so ubiquitous that we even incorporate them into our language in a lot of different ways. If someone eats messily, we call it eating like a pig. If someone is just like a messy person, we call them a pig. If someone's room is messy, we call it a pigsty. We'll not be busting any of those myths. Pigs are actually relatively cleanly creatures. They just like to roll around in mud because they don't have hair. But yeah, we won't be going into too much of that. But anyway, and all of that is just about the domestic pig. One subspecies within the whole group. So let's talk about the rest of the group. Pigs are artiodactyls, which means they are even-toed ungulates. So these are things with hooves that have an even number of toes. These are things like deer, cows, antelope, sheep, goats, camels, pronghorn, here in North America, because they are not antelopes, giraffes, hippos, and also whales. So
what?
They used to. Okay. we'll talk a little bit more about it as we go on here in just a sec. But yes, whales. The closest relative of whales are hippos.
Got it.
At least living relative. So back before they went back to the water, they did have little tiny hooves. Whales did, and also pigs are included in this group. So basically, anything with hooves that is not a rhino, a horse, or a tapir. Within artiodactyls, so imagine sort of like a tree of life diagram. A very simple one. We're not going to go super in depth here. Within the artiodactyls, there's one group called the ruminants. These are the kind that have multiple chambers in their stomach. They have very efficient digestive systems. And these are typically the ones with very ornate like head gear. Things like deer with their antlers, cows with their horns, stuff like that.
Right.
Ruminants are the bovines. So these are cows, sheep, goats, antelopes. The deer, giraffes, and pronghorn. Notably, not pigs. So that is most artiodactyls are in that group. Closely related to that group is a group called the whippomorphs, which are the hippos and whales. And then just outside both of those is the group that contains the pigs.
They're just alone?
Yes. So if it's sort of like stepwise, so if it's like the ruminants, so that's most of them, the cows, giraffes, sheep, deer, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. They are a sister group, at least of the things we have still around today. They're a sister group to the whippomorphs, the hippos and whales. Mm-hmm. Next would be the pig group, so it'd be like their cousin. And then the second cousin would be things like camels and llamas. But on their branch is sort of the pig group. On their branch, they are kind of by themselves.
Okay.
So what most people would call a pig is, formally the suborder Swine, which I think is very funny.
Yeah, weena.
Not that part. But whenever in like old-timey shows or movies or anything, when people are calling pigs, like a farmer is like calling their pigs, they'll like suey, that whole thing. And that is this group, the Swine. And they did that kind of on purpose. And so what makes this group different from their relatives, those ruminants, hippos and whales, and then also the camels. What makes this group different? The most obvious thing is a lot of stuff around their face. Mostly, it's a piece of anatomy that is very unique to this group called the nasal disc. The very characteristic, like, round pig nose.
Mm-hmm.
All of that is cartilage. So it's still, like, really stiff, but it's not, like, supported by bone. So it's not like, I'm trying to think. There are some different groups that have, like, weird stuff on their snout that has, like, bone underneath it. That's not the case with pigs. This is just like a hard cartilage, so it's a lot similar to your nose, but, like, obviously much, much stiffer. They have a lot more tissue in there that keeps it stiff, mostly because they use it for digging. If you live in a place where there are a bunch of feral pigs, you'll know they destroy everything because they're constantly rooting around in the dirt looking for roots and tubers like potatoes and things that they eat for food.
Mm-hmm.
Big problem in Louisiana.
Yeah. They're also sort of unique among all the artiodactyls in that they have more than 2 toes on each foot. If you think of, like, a cow or a lot of sheep, where they have, like, the 2 main toes, and then here and there they'll have, like, little tiny nubbins that sort of face backwards that are like the remnants of the fingers that used to be there. In pigs, the remnants are more than remnants. They are very notable there. If you've ever seen a pig's foot, you'll know they have the 2 main ones that they walk on mostly, and then the 2 little, like, spikes that sort of come off the back of the foot. Those are remnants of toes, but they are much more sort of... They're much less reduced than they are in a lot of other artiodactyls. Also kind of weird for artiodactyls, they still have their upper incisors. So their upper front teeth. If you think of, like, a cow or a deer or a giraffe, they don't. They have the bottom ones, but they don't have the top. But pigs still do. Camels also still do. Camels are very weird. We had a whole episode about camels and how much I don't like them. All ruminants lack their front top incisors. And camels have lost a couple of them. They've really done some weird things in that they've turned some of their front incisors into additional canine teeth.
Whoa.
So they're, like, sharp and pointy like canine teeth.
Are they canines, though?
No, they are incisors, but they have evolved them to be, like, sharp and pointy like canines, especially in the males, because they use that to bite and fight each other. Yeah.
Okay.
And speaking of canines, in male suines, so that's members of this group, they are sharpened into tusks. In some species, mostly on, we'll talk more, but on one side of this sort of group in particular, the whole tooth socket for the upper canine is rotated so that the tooth sticks out of the mouth. This is very easy to see in something like a warthog. If you imagine Pumbaa from Lion King, how his teeth just sort of stick out the side of his face.
Yep.
The teeth don't just grow into that shape. The whole tooth socket is, like, rotated so that it points outward instead of down. Very weird. And that's potentially, there's been a lot of research into tusks and why some groups of hooved animals have tusks rather than horns. And there's been a lot of really interesting research into that, but we're not going to go too much into that. And lastly, for some of the weird things that make this group unique, they're the most omnivorous artiodactyls that we have around today. Some species of pigs are more herbivorous than others. But as we've talked about a number of times on the podcast, most herbivores will eat meat on occasion. You know, it's not unusual if a cow is out grazing and it happens to come across a baby bird or something, like a ground nesting bird, it'll definitely eat that bird. And that's not unusual. I've personally seen deer eating snakes before. Very bizarre to see, but they do it. But pigs are the only like land-based artiodactyls, so basically excluding whales, that have teeth adapted for eating much besides plants. If you've ever looked at a pig tooth, they look shockingly like human teeth. To the point that in 1922, a Swine tooth from the late Miocene, early Pliocene, so like around 5 million years ago, was found in Nebraska, and it was published as the first evidence of apes in North America.
Oh.
Yeah. It was published.
Okay.
Yeah, it was published in a
Awkward.
very well-regarded paleontologist at the time. And it was even given a name. It was given the name Hesperopithecus Harold Cookii. And there was a bit of external things going on. There was a lot of international competition. Very nationalism-esque. Basically, everyone wanted humans to be from their country.
Mm-hmm.
So, a little bit of bias here, probably, but yeah. Obviously, that was since rejected.
Yeah.
And it was a fossil, so it wasn't just like a random farmer's pig tooth. And so it was real. This wasn't like a fake or anything. They just got it wrong.
Happens.
Yeah. I mean, genuinely, yeah.
Yep.
And so that's sort of the larger group, the Suina. But the group has two families. The first one is the Suidae. These are what most people would call pigs. The true pigs, if you will. This group,
True pigs.
Yes. This group has things like domestic pigs, wild boar, that's the species that we domesticated pigs from. Warthogs, and the Babirusa, one of my personal favorites. We'll talk more about it later.
Babirusa.
They're all native to the Old World. The other family is the Tayasuidae, most commonly called the peccaries. They're native to South and Central America, and very southern North America. They used to live all over North America, but during the Ice Age, they kind of got restricted to the southern parts. Basically, they kind of just get up into like the coastal parts of Mexico, a little bit up into Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona a little bit. If you've ever heard of a javelina, that's these. These are not pigs. They look very, very similar, but are different in some pretty like small but important ways. So first we'll go back. Picture Pumbaa from The Lion King. He's a warthog and a pretty typical looking pig, albeit with more pronounced tusks than most of the other pigs get. So he is a true pig. Compared to a warthog, peccaries have kind of the same body shape with the same characteristic pig nose, but they generally have slightly shorter snouts, so their head sort of from the side looks more round. These ones only have 2 visible toes, like most other artiodactyls do. Whereas pigs, like I said, walk sort of on their equivalent of their middle and ring fingers, while their pinky and pointer fingers are sort of rotated around to the back. Those are the little spikes on the backside of a pig's foot.
Mm-hmm.
Peccaries have slightly different ears than pigs. Pigs have like more pointed ears. If you picture like Babe, that was a very popular movie when I was young. Or Charlotte's Web, the pig in Charlotte's Web.
Mm-hmm.
They have pointed ears at the end. Peccaries have almost like bear ears, how they're just like kind of little and round and fuzzy. Honestly, pretty cute.
Mhm.
They also digest food differently. So this is not like a skeletal thing at all, but pigs, so true pigs, are hindgut for fermenters. That's how most herbivores do it, is they have to like ferment plants like you would to make beer or something.
Mhm.
They ferment the plants that they eat in sort of the lower chambers of the stomach. Peccaries do it in the front, more like other ruminants. That's sort of where cows do it. That's where deer do it. So they are a bit more efficient in their digestion than true pigs are. Their tusks are also a little different. In many pigs, like warthogs, the socket, like I said, is rotated so they point out of the mouth. In peccaries, they aren't rotated like that, so they just have big old canine teeth that point down, like little fangs, basically, when they open their mouth. But in their environments, ecologically, they do very, very similar things to pigs. They eat the same omnivorous diet, they travel in herds that vary in size from a few dozen to over 100, 30 to 50 feral hogs. And so those are the real differences. If you were to look at one of them, you would call it a pig. Right. So it's like they're fairly closely related. They look very similar. They do very similar things to their environment, but they are not like the same, basically.
I did just look up like a visual of the peccary versus like a pig, and just general bias on my end, I do think the peccaries are cuter.
Oh, it's the ears for sure.
Yeah, it's the ears, and they also have like kind of like a concave snout instead of like a convex.
Yeah, they do.
Like, it's cute.
Yeah, they're like they also tend to have more fur than most pigs do. Depends on the species a lot. We'll go through some of the species of different pigs and stuff, but pigs, it's kind of hit or miss whether or not they have hair. Most peccaries seem to have hair, though there's not a lot of them, so there's not a lot of variety. But anyway, so this group overall is actually fairly small, including both pigs and peccaries. There's 24 species total. It's like not all that diverse, especially relative to things like the bovids. So it's the cow family, but that also includes all the cows, all the goats, all the sheep, all the antelope, anything with like cow-like horns. So it's not deer antlers, basically, is in that family, which is enormous. That is a huge family. On this side of things, like I said, not very diverse. And of those, 21 are pigs, only 3 are peccaries. We'll go through, like I said, just a few of the species here and there, mostly because there's not all that many of them, so it's easy to cover just the general vibe. First, we have the wild boar. This is the species Sus scrofa. So the genus name for boar is Sus, S-U-S. I just thought that was funny. This is the species that we domesticated our pigs that we eat from. One of the largest native ranges of any terrestrial animal on the planet, like excluding all the ones that we carry with us everywhere we go. Just the natural, normal range of undomesticated wild boar stretches from Spain to Japan.
Wow.
And all the way down into northern Africa and Indonesia. Enormous. And it's all, there's a ton of different subspecies, but I'm not going to get into all that. This is generally very stockily built with very powerful jaws and neck muscles. If you look at wild boar, it just looks like they don't have a neck because it is just like a tube of muscle that they use basically to dig with. They have those really strong muscles to be able to push their snout through all the dirt and stuff to dig up food. And they can live basically anywhere besides deserts and extreme cold, but even with that, they do get up into like Finland and Sweden and like I said, down south into Indonesia and all along the Nile River in Egypt and Sudan and South Sudan. So it's like basically anywhere there's a bit of water and it's not super cold, these guys will do fine. Which is part of the problem, because when they get out, when they break containment, they are a huge problem.
Yeah.
There are 7 other species in this genus of like hogs or boar or whatever. They all have pretty small ranges on various islands in the Indo-Pacific. For example, 4 of those 7 other species only live on islands in the Philippines. So it's like, this one species made it to the mainland and then just took off. But the rest are pretty highly isolated. Next we have the pygmy hog, which is Porcula sylvania, native to sort of the lowlands on the south side of the Himalayas in countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan. However, it's pretty close to extinction, mainly from stuff like habitat destruction. Lives in like sort of these grasslands that are made out of like a few very specific species of grass, and that have historically been used for like thatching roofs by local peoples there for hundreds of thousands of years. These days, those grasslands are mostly destroyed for agricultural use, and the pigs are pretty highly restricted to like a handful of national parks in India. But this is the smallest species in this group. They're only like a foot tall, less than 2 feet long, and only about 15 to 20 pounds. Real cute little guys. Side note, off of this here, don't ever buy something called a teacup pig, because that's a lie.
What?
No.
Hold on. What's a teacup pig?
So they're advertised as like small pigs, like domestic pigs, like a breed of domestic pig that will stay pretty small. That's not true. They still get up to like at least 50, 60 pounds. And that is a hog.
Some people have pigs for pets, Mike, like indoor house pets.
Yes.
I'm aware of that. I've never heard of a teacup.
Oh, that's usually like what they get.
That's how they're like branded. To tell people, to make people think that it's something that's easy to keep in your house. It's not.
So it's a lie.
It's definitely a lie. Yeah. So just don't. Let's see. Next, we have the genus Potamocyrus, or the bush pigs. There are 2 species that live in Africa. One lives in very forested areas in sort of western central Africa, places like the Congo, Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, places like that. The other lives on like the other side of Africa. Lives in like more forested areas of like Kenya, South Africa, Zambia, Zimbabwe. They look very similar to wild boar, but need more forested habitats than wild boar tend to need. That's kind of their niche. Next, we have the giant forest hog, Hylochirus. Ooh, that sure is a name. Hylochirus meinertzschenii. I said that wrong, but we're rolling with it. This one is the largest pig in the world. It's about 3 feet tall at the shoulder, and on average about 400 pounds. This one's also native to Central and Western Africa. There are 2 species of warthogs in the genus Phacochirus, mostly native to like sort of the more open grassland habitats of eastern southern Africa. One of the species just sort of follows the southern edge of the Sahara Desert all the way from coast to coast. Warthogs are famous for having proportionally much larger tusks than most other species of pigs. That's why, like, Pumbaa from The Lion King has such big tusks.
That's why.
Yeah. And lastly, one of my favorite animals in the world because they're so goofy. The Babirusas in the genus Babirusa, but it's not spelled the same for whatever reason as the common word Babirusa. There are 4 species, all native to different islands in Indonesia. And this whole genus is famous for their tusks. So, warthogs have much thicker tusks than most other pigs. These ones have very long tusks. So in the males of these species, and very rarely in females, it does happen, but even when it does, they're much smaller. The upper tusks have fully rotated the tooth socket, not to point out, but to point up. And so once the males start to reach puberty, basically, the tusks start growing up through the skin and tissue of the snout.
Oh my gosh.
And they come out of the snout.
It seems less than pleasant.
Ew.
I don't think it I don't think it hurts them more than just like wisdom teeth coming in sort of pain. I don't know that for sure, but they're like not uncommon to see in zoos. And I didn't see anything about like them like getting infections or anything or bleeding out from this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you look them up, they look bizarre. Because the tusks curve back toward the rest of the skull, and in captivity, it's kind of a problem, because if they don't get to wear down their teeth, because they're ever growing, just like elephant tusks are, if they don't get to wear them down like they would in nature, they will continue to grow and pierce their own skull.
Oh god.
I think I've seen like skeletons
Yes.
Of different animals like that where just, uncontrolled growth all of a sudden will kill an animal.
Yeah, obviously that is very rare to happen in captivity these days. But at least one of those 4 species, they can grow that long that they will basically kill themselves if it's not worn down properly. Very cool, very weird. I love them. So that's the true pigs. That's the suids. On the other side, let's look at our 3 peccaries. The first, the collared peccary, Dacotyles takaju, or tajaku? Yeah. Extremely widespread. So this is sort of the wild boar equivalent of the peccaries. Basically from northern Argentina all the way up to southern Arizona and Texas. So basically, most of South America, all through Central America, and then a bit into the United States even. Like the wild boar, extremely generalist lifestyle, lives in basically any kind of environment you can imagine, from the Amazon rainforest to deserts in Mexico to the Phoenix suburbs. You can see people's footage from like Ring cameras of them just hanging out in their yard. And they kind of just, these are troublemakers in that pigs are very smart. So like they will figure out ways to like get into your trash. They're probably not quite as smart as like bears, and they don't have like the use of their hands like bears do, but like you have to take similar precautions when like getting rid of various food scraps and things, because the pigs will find a way into it, or the peccaries will find their way into it. That being said, they are relatively small. They only top out at about 60 pounds. So like a good sized animal, but it's not like, the giant forest hog on the pig side.
Mm-hmm.
The white-lipped peccary is the next one. That is Tyasu peccary. Also very widespread in South and Central America, but more foresty. So this one doesn't do as well in sort of the arid regions. So it kind of stops once you get into like the deserty areas of like Mexico. It's a little bit bigger, up to almost about 90 pounds at the top end. And then lastly, the Tricoan peccary, Catagonus wagneri, may or may not be a different genus. That's up in the air, mostly because there are fossil members of this genus that were found and named first. So we may or may not be in a different genus. Unsure. Very narrow range, only lives in sort of the corner 3-way border between Paraguay, Bolivia, and Argentina. Funny, this species specializes in eating cacti. That's kind of its niche. Yep.
That's cool.
Yeah, so that's sort of the groups that we're talking about here. Like I said, very small group of animals, like diversity-wise. Like I said, less than 25. That being said, they're everywhere. Every continent but North America, and even sort of North America has them a little bit, has native swines, except Antarctica and Australia. Although I'm sure there are lots of invasive pigs in Australia now.
Oh, yeah.
I can only imagine. It's Australia, of course there is.
Yeah. All right, so that's kind of the modern diversity. Let's talk about the group in the past. So, firstly, I'd like to give some big shouts to the Wayback Machine, archive.org, for helping me find sources.
One of the best resources on the internet.
And not just that, but like, and I'll put a link down below. So, if you make an account with them, they have like, so archive.org is best known for like preserving websites that later get taken down. That's sort of what it's most known for. It's also just a giant library. Like if you make an account with them, you can sign out books to just read in your browser. And so even when I was working on my master's, I was looking for this book in particular. The school's library didn't have it, and it was, by the time I realized I needed it, I was short on time, and it'd have to get like mailed from another university. I'm like, I don't got time for that. And when I was doing the research for this episode, I ended up finding this book just on archive.com.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Stuff was a little outdated but it was from I think like the early 2000s, maybe like late 90s. So stuff was a little outdated for how we name things and organize things today, but still super helpful for just sort of connecting one dot to another. So let's take a look at what this whole piggy group was doing it through time. Most of all of the modern groups of artiodactyls in general are interesting to talk about through geologic time because, all things considered, they didn't really start making big moves until like quite recently. If you remember, we did an episode about cows and all of their relatives. They didn't really start becoming like big major factors in their environments until like quite recently. And even things like deer didn't get to the Americas until also very recently. And nowadays they're everywhere, especially in South America. There's so many species of deer in South America. And pigs kind of are a similar track to that. So the first artiodactyls, so that's this whole group of even-toed ungulates, they show up in sort of the early Eocene epoch. That's 55 million years ago. Episode 131 for more. Which isn't really surprising that that's kind of when this group shows up. Most modern groups of mammals start out around then. It's 10 million years after the big mass extinction that took out all of the non-bird dinosaurs. So given that gives mammals enough time to sort of recoup, because they, still got hit by the extinction pretty hard. So it gave them, a solid 10 million years for sort of their rebound phase before they started sort of settling into the plans, the different groups of animals that we still see today. However, the record of those early groups of how those early artiodactyls diversified into the groups that we have today isn't very good. So we don't have like a clear path, with the exception of whales, because whales conveniently like water, and water is a great place to get fossilized. But for the rest of them, we don't have a good record for how those early primitive ones became the ones we see today, or at least diversified into the groups we see today. And we have really good records of after that, which is convenient, but not sort of the beginnings of most of these groups. Being that, as we sort of talked about a little earlier on, the sort of family tree of the artiodactyls, being that the Swines were one of the earlier groups. So they're not in the ruminants. They're not with whales and hippos. They sort of split off a little earlier. We're pretty sure that by the end of the Eocene, somewhere around 34 million years ago, that they were fully split from the rest of all of their hooved cousins. And also, based on the first fossils we see, likely somewhere in Southeast Asia. It's kind of interesting, though, because you'd think, with how similar the pigs and peccaries are to one another, that they split from each other relatively recently. But, based on molecular stuff, like I said, the fossils from around this time, not terrific. Based on DNA studies, it seems like pigs and peccaries split almost immediately after the Swine group splits from the rest of artiodactyls. So even though they look really similar, they've been separated evolutionarily for at least 30 million years. So let's start with the peccaries, since there's less to talk about. And so peccaries are kind of weird in that while we have some fossils here and there in that region, Southeast Asia, in the Oligocene, so like the epoch after the Eocene, so this is somewhere 34 to 23 million years ago, episode 143, we don't really see any peccaries in the Old World. We know they must have been there because they had to split from the true pigs at some point and someplace. But we kind of just don't have them. At least the early ones in the Old World. And as it turns out, both the true pigs and the peccaries each have another extinct family of piggies that they are each more closely related to than they are to each other. So there are two extinct families of pigs that sort of almost kind of work as like a sort of bridge between the two groups that we still have today. The family that is sort of on the peccary side that's extinct is called the Dolichochiridae, but you'll often see them called Eurasian peccaries, even though they're not peccaries. It seems that this group kind of just hasn't been studied a lot, but, you know, while they aren't peccaries, they were hanging out all across Eurasia. It's similar range to what we see in true pigs today, all the way from Spain to China. And it's kind of thought that peccaries arrived to North America around this time. So, like I said, doesn't seem like a very well-studied group, but from what I could tell and interpret, it seemed that peccaries probably evolved from this family in North America. Like I said, confusing. Not a lot of members of this group. We're not even going to mention any species in this group because there's just not a lot of them. But by the late Oligocene epoch, so around 25, 26 million years ago, that seems like when they made the journey from Asia to North America, like through Alaska and then down through Canada, basically. We don't see the first peccary fossils in North America until about 18 million years ago, though. Like I said, just not a lot of fossils. And by the time we see these first peccary fossils, they seem to be more or less modern peccaries. So how they got that way, unsure. They then crossed into South America during the Great American Biotic Interchange, which was only about 3 million years ago. Talked about that way back in episode 16. And around then, that was, you know, they lived in North America for like 15 million years, just kind of doing their thing. You know, leaving a lot of fossils then. Thanks. And then, once North and South America were connected through Panama, animals and plants started flowing both from North America to South America, as well as, vice versa. And peccaries got into South America and just thrived. There's tons of different, fossil species of peccaries from South America. And then not long, or in the ballpark time frame when humans got to North America, peccaries seemed to go away in North America in the Pleistocene. May or may not be our fault. Lots of different stuff went extinct around this time for various reasons. That other kind of weird family that might have been like the bridge was, by all accounts, fairly successful all across Eurasia. Went extinct in the late Miocene. Probably because true pigs later then got there.
Mm.
Alright, so that's all the peccaries. They're the confusing ones. We're done with that. Suids, the true pigs. They seemed to be pretty tightly restricted to Southeast Asia from their start. So like I said, sometime around 34 million years ago, until the early Miocene, around 20 million years ago. So for 10 to 15 million years or so, they were pretty restricted to Southeast Asia. And at this time, none of them were all that closely related to our modern pigs. They looked quite similar, and there were a few subfamilies around in the Miocene. Each one was a little bit different. One had, more generalist-like teeth, so very human-like teeth. One had weird horn-like protrusions on its head, which was very strange. Not like rhino horns, it came out of the forehead and was very thin, almost pencil thin. And it's what are you using that for, man? Because you're not fighting,
right.
You're not fighting stuff with that. It's not like it's a rhino horn. One subfamily was likely a bit more carnivorous than the others, had more carnivore-like teeth. But generally, all of them were pig-shaped, pig-sized, mostly living pig-like lifestyles. Just little differences here and there. Then, around the late Miocene, this is around 10 million years ago, the Swine, so that's the subfamily that contains basically all of our modern pigs, shows up. And then by the end of the Miocene, only a few million years later, all of the other ones go extinct or are in very steep decline. This modern subfamily basically just comes in and takes over all the niches of everything else. The kind of weird possible exception to that are the Babiruses, the ones with the tusks that impale themselves. They may or may not be in this subfamily. Sometimes when people do studies on them, they come out as related to warthogs, which kind of makes sense because they also have big and kind of strange tusks. Other times they come out as not closely related to any of the other living pigs and are kind of on their own. Unfortunately, we have literally 0 fossils of Babiruses, so that doesn't help. And so I'm not sure where that currently stands. As far as I know, they are still in this subfamily, but I don't know that for sure. Anywho, around 2 million years ago, so very recently, the genus Sus, so that is the wild boar, spread more widely and basically replaced all the other pigs in continental Eurasia.
Wow.
Almost all exclusively because of the wild boar. And as sort of wrapping up here, one last note about pigs, or rather, things you'll often hear called pigs. Usually with some other hyperbolic descriptor, such as hell pigs or Terminator pigs. That is a group of animals called entelodonts, and they're called hell pigs, Terminator pigs, etc. because, superficially, they kind of look like the stereotype of what, an ancient pig would look like. You know, if you took like a cartoon, you know, de-evolution ray and pointed it at a pig, it would turn into something that looks a lot like one of these. They're most of them are quite a bit bigger. Some of the species got to like 6 feet tall at the shoulder, very large. They have much bigger teeth, especially canine teeth. They have bumps and protrusions kind of all over the skull that give them like a pretty menacing kind of look. However, they still lived a lot like pigs, possibly a bit more predatory, but definitely still being omnivores. They definitely had omnivore teeth. And even though they look fairly similar, they definitely didn't have like the pig snout. These guys really aren't closely related to anything that we have around today, but are most closely related to hippos. Meaning that they're not closely related to pigs at all.
Okay, I thought that's what you're saying. That is silly.
Yeah. So you'll see them online called something pigs, but they are not. And so
something. Okay.
Yeah. So I couldn't talk.
Is this like how strawberries or whatever aren't actually berries or like whatever it is?
Yeah, but with paleontology, it's always kind of weird because paleontology always gets kind of like hyperbolic when you're not talking to a paleontologist. If you are just watching, you know, popular media, you know, a lot of times things will get hyped up because it's big and ancient and exciting. And these guys are just as much a victim of that as, you know, a number of dinosaurs are. But yeah, it's because calling something a Terminator hippo or a hell hippo doesn't quite have the same ring to it as hell pig does. And let's be honest, Terminator hippos are just modern hippos.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
even Mudang.
Yes, even Mudang. You think it's really cute when Mudang bites, you know, their keeper's legs. I don't know if Mudang's a boy or a girl, to be honest. But yeah, you think it's cute? No, it's trying to kill their keeper. Hippos are very fiercely territorial animals and kill many people every year. And there's also an invasive colony of them in South America, which I also think is just very funny.
Weird.
Thanks to the drug trade, actually, with Pablo Escobar. Yeah, he just wanted some hippos, and then they all got loose. I think he had like 30 of them, and they got loose, and now there's at least several dozen of them. I don't know how much above 100 there are, but yeah. Anyway,
that's why we have wild monkeys in Florida.
Wild monkey? Wait, really?
I mean, it's not related to the drug thing. But,
right, yeah.
It was from Tarzan movie. They filmed it.
That's a bummer. Yeah, and that's another thing. So I should have mentioned that, I guess, a little bit when I was talking about the teacup pigs. The absolute worst thing you can do after getting a pet and then you realizing that it's not the right pet for you is to just let it go. You know, depending on where you live, you know, I have a pet lizard. If I were to let her go outside into the wilderness here in Pennsylvania, she would die.
Yeah.
But if you live in Florida, no, it'll probably be fine. And unfortunately, with teacup pigs, you know, most of the feral pig population is, you know, like agricultural pigs that got loose. But there's probably, you know, a decent chunk of them, definitely the minority, but of people who thought pigs would be a good pet, and then they realized, oh no, this is gonna get over 100 pounds living in my house.
Yeah.
What do I do with this? And then they just let it go. And then one last thing to sort of end us on with pigs is that in some future episode, we will talk more about domestication in general. But today is not that day. So you'll have to wait to hear more about the domestication of pigs in the future. There was some really interesting stuff. I'll give just a little snippet, little teaser. that it seems like we domesticated pigs more than once, which is really interesting. That's relatively rare. And that there's even like lots of different like breeds of pigs from separate domestication events, which is interesting, or like re-domestication events from feral domestic pigs. Very interesting. Domestication is so weird. It's such a weird thing that we do. But with that, that's all I got. Do you guys have any last piggy questions?
I mean, they mostly roll around food, which I think is probably a different podcast.
I mean, hey, I very much enjoy pork. I grew up eating lots of pork loin and pork chops. Liz, not so much. My wife, not so much. I don't believe we've bought pork chops once since we've been married. Anyway, I enjoy pork, and this was a very fun episode for me to write.
And this was a very fun episode for us to listen to. Happy New Year, everybody. It is the year 2025, and this has been episode 151 of I Wish You Were Dead, a podcast about things that used to be alive. We will be back in a couple of weeks, but until then, take care, everybody.
This episode of I Wish You Were Dead was written by Gavin Davidson and hosted by Gavin Davidson, Mike Bryson, and Finella Campanino. It was sound edited and edited for YouTube by Gavin Davidson. Special thanks to former guests of the pod and to listeners like you.